Hello, folks. Welcome to Between Awesome and Disaster. I'm your host, Will Carey. This is my podcast. Thank you for being here. How are you? That used to be more of a loaded question, and I've been thinking about this more and more lately. This is kind of where my mind's at mentally. Now that I don't know what your experience with COVID right now is, I recently I was supposed to do a tech gig for a show that ended up getting canceled because the producer got COVID, and I realized that was like the first time I had heard that in like my general and extended social circle for a little while now, and it's odd. Now it feels like lockdown and the pandemic and the very seemingly plausible idea of a disease, a virus that could eradicate life on the face of the earth being a very real possibility seems like such a distant memory now that it almost feels like it didn't happen. And I have to remind myself that it did, and that I'm not crazy for feeling the way that I did during that time. Maybe that is the mind's way of coping with the extraordinary. I've certainly, I have a lot of hypotheses on the nature of what the brain does to humans in order to cope with trauma or the extraordinary, just the ability to sort of erase huge problems and huge global events. I find particularly interesting because I see it happen all the time. Maybe it's certainly a coping mechanism. I imagine. I know at a certain point we're going to have a reckoning with that again. I have a lot of materials for my original wedding date, which doesn't exist. It's ended up being a completely different date. So it should not be a collective like amnesic moment, but a big part of where I've been creatively in terms of I've been writing some new music lately. A big part of where I have been is sort of feeling like maybe the end has happened. Maybe it's going slowly. Maybe we're unaware of it. But sort of embracing a phrase I've said on this podcast before, a kind of cheerful nihilism, in that kind of everything is going wrong, but I aspire to maintain positivity. Not unlike that the music video for that song by the band Ghost, Dance Macabre, which I've heard is inspired by these like big plague parties that used to happen during the 1918 flu pandemic. So what a full circle time to be alive. And especially, I'm still recording this. We haven't talked about this too much on this podcast, but we're going to today. The ongoing writer strike. The business is continuing to evolve, and as I'm sure some of you know, I'm pro organizing, I'm pro labor. I am all for people getting what they deserve, because are so few things that are uncertain in this life. And if you work hard, and TV writers do work hard, then you should have some financial security for yourself and for your family, especially if there's a time where the people that you're working for are being secretive, and they're being and they're still making money. I know that that goes against the idea of the game we play here in the United States. The idea that it's going to be me. We all are like to pretend like we're still some sort of prospectors that are going to strike it rich and they'll get yours. Maybe, but also maybe not. So there's got to be a situation where a lot of people can be fine, and instead of a lot of people that are not, and few people with excess. that's what I think needs to happen. We're going to talk about that today as well with someone, with my guest who's actively, as of this recording, striking on and is out on the picket line now. My guest on the show today is comedian Brendan Fitzgibbons. Brendan, I have known for a number of years. I would say probably over a decade now. I've known Brendan Fitzgibbons, and I met him when I first moved to New York City, and I was going to do open mics at a place called the Perch Cafe. It's a coffee shop that had a mixed open mic, and what I mean by that is there was music, there was comedy, there was performance art, storytelling. There's a whole bunch of different stuff that happened in this open mic, and I used to go there because it was an eclectic crowd. You could generally get a better sense of your jokes as opposed to an open mic that was just comedians. So I became aware of Brendan again because I knew he did this podcast called Spiritual Asshole, where he talks to sort of like self-help, life coaches, self-improvement types of folks, an industry that I am notoriously skeptical of. And he talks to a lot of them about their method and their process. And Brendan's also WGA, so he's very much on the front lines in terms of the current writer's strike. So it was cool to be able to chat with him about some of that stuff, as well as talk about comedy with someone who I have been doing comedy with in New York City here and there. We've seen each other around. We saw each other around for a long time. Now he's out on the West Coast. It was nice to be able to reconnect. And that's what you're going to hear now. This is a longer monologue than I usually do, but I have a lot of thoughts and a lot of clarity. Maybe it's the thunderstorm that just rolled through while I was recording this, but I am at I'm at a sense of calm right now that I intend to write out. I look forward to. I'm looking forward to being in Southern California later this month. I'm looking forward to a lot of things. Also at the I don't know if I mentioned this in the last episode, the Blink-182 show I went to at the Barclays Center. My wife Chelsea and I were kind of situated behind where the soundboard was. At a certain point in the show, the Kardashians walked up and were watching the show from the soundboard. My wife's a follower of the Kardashians and their programming, and many people I'm sure know that Travis Barker from Blink is married to Chloe, and by proxy I've heard that their courtship and romance is very genuine and very sweet, and so I like that. I'm a big fan of love. I'm a big fan of a lot of things, I've been told, and I'm a big fan of Brendan Fitzgibbons, and we're going to talk to him right now. So let's get into it. Are you in LA?
I am in LA. I'm in Pasadena.
Ah, yeah, I know Pasadena. That's I might be thinking of Glendale, but where is Pasadena in relation to LA proper?
No, I mean Glendale is super close to me. So Glendale is like 8 minutes from me. So it's even farther west. Pasadena is basically the most far west you can go and still kind of be considered that you're in LA.
Gotcha. Well, because LA, I feel like you can still be in Los Angeles and also feel like you're in a pretty comfortable suburban area with like lawns and people who have like a back patio and stuff like that. All that kind of suburban shit.
Yeah, people here, I was in New York for 12 years, and what I've noticed living in Los Angeles is there's something here that's called quiet, where people are quiet. And it's very interesting, but no, I love living in Pasadena, but it's so funny because it's all relative. Everyone in LA thinks that like 20 minutes is a long time away. So everyone talks about Pasadena like it's a romantic Italy vacation. They're like, Pasadena, I was there once in 2007. It was amazing. I took a small plane and it's 15 minutes from them because it's not like New York, like everybody is absolutely softer and more comfortable here, which I like, but I still have that New York ethos. Like, you know, we hustled so hard. We'd stand on the N train at 2 a.m. getting back from the shitty bar show you did in Flushing.
Right. Or
Yeah.
or fucking taking the N to the 4 to go and like stand outside the comic strip for like 3 hours
Oh,
to sign up for your lottery audition in like another 4 months, and then you're going to go down to Union Square, take the L, and do like a Ridgewood. Now there's more shows happening, and like we're past Bushwick now, dude. We're out into Ridgewood,
no way.
East Williamsburg, all of that stuff.
Oh my gosh. Yeah,
Um,
I don't miss those. I actually had a scooter in New York because it was the only way I could get around without losing my mind. I at a certain point the subway was like breaking me down emotionally.
Yeah, well, there's just some treks that I'm with you. I have an e-bike, so there's some treks that
Oh, that's great.
I won't do. Are you out there full time now?
Yeah, I'm out here full time. I've been here since 2021, early 2021. I came out here.
Okay.
And the pandemic hit in New York, and I was actually in Vienna when it happened, when it actually hit. And I don't know if you remember this, but Trump gave a speech where he was like, if you're in Europe, you have 1 day to leave, otherwise you're there forever. That was me. I was there in Europe. And I woke up to like 40 texts from all my friends and family being like, Brendan, you can't come back. And at one point, my one friend sent me this funny text. He's like, Emperor Trump has decreed it so. You shall live in Europe the rest of your life. Emperor Trump has said you are never coming back.
Right.
It's so good.
Yeah, that was his plan the whole time. Get everybody out, and then it's just like, oh, no takesies, no takey.
Yeah, so I snuck back in, but that was my mic drop moment because I've been wanting to leave New York. I worked out here on a show in 2018 and immediately fell in love with it and got made fun of by all my New York friends that were out here too because they were like, you changed. I was like only wearing shorts, and I still in my mind. I like remember how in stand-up everyone's like, you got to wear pants. I wear shorts all the time on stage now, and I love it. I'm like, nope, I'm a new person.
Yeah, that is like that is one of those. There's a couple things I love stand up still, but there's a couple of things that I really wish we would stop arguing about, and one of them is wearing shorts on stage. Because if you're just
It's
doing
so
like,
stupid.
because if you're just doing like a bar show, or even like I don't know, if you're doing like a Tuesday night at the Comedy Store, no big show business career decision is going to get made because your legs are visible.
Dude.
And also, fucking David Cross wore shorts through like the entirety of Mr. Show. So that's like not a thing that I personally think makes sense.
Yeah, and we got into this business because there are no rules. And I also find it so funny that comics like this is where you guys draw the line. You guys are all like depressive alcoholics with like suicidal ideations, and they're like, "No, jeans. We have to wear jeans." I'm like, "Okay, so this is where we're going to have rules." No, the whole reason why we got into this, and I remember my buddy said Nick Swartzen would always headline Caroline's in shorts. That guy's whole act is shorts.
Yeah, I've never seen any comic get saved because their material is bad, but they had pants. The other thing,
well, at least this guy's wearing really nice pants.
the other thing I'll say about LA though is everything is either a 20-minute drive or a 4-day walk. That's my experience, and maybe
that's funny
because I've been there a couple times. I like it out there. I understand the appeal now, and also when I've performed out there, everyone in LA is like super nice. Maybe it's real, maybe it's not in some cases, but it's not like there's a benefit of the doubt given in like a regular interaction when you have like a lot of sunshine in.
There is like the big difference in audiences to me is New York audiences mostly tended to be like, all right, prove it. LA audiences are like, we're here for a nice time. Thanks for being here. We're all here for a nice time. And it's like that adjustment, because I still have like that little bit of New York edge. Like I was just talking about how you really are the product of where you started doing stand-up. If you show me a comic, there's a good chance I would know where they started because every city has a specific ethos. And New York's ethos, when I started, was like edgy, quick jokes and like let's fight. And they're like, we don't need to. And like coming out here, everyone's like, why are you fighting? Why are you mad? I'm like, okay, sorry. I'm sorry for fighting. I don't want to fight.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I like that I've had that experience so that when like shit pops off or a crowd gets rowdy, like, I don't know, late show Friday, you have that sort of like, you're not going to falter or wither under those circumstances.
Totally.
But it's really nice to be able to let off the gas a little bit sometimes.
Yeah, like that constant state of like, I'm going to fight is also just kind of how you feel in New York. Like you're always on guard and you're like, whoosh. Well, and it's also true because like someone's going to come behind you and be like, hey, do you want to buy my rap CD? Someone's asking you if you like for directions to the subway. Someone, it's like, it's stuff is always happening. So you're like constantly heads on a swivel. And so that ethos, I definitely had that in stand up. And I think I'm finally calming down after being in LA for 3 years.
Right on, man. So yeah, just 3 years of some beach and waves. I get it. I totally see.
Meditating, yeah.
So where did you start comedy? Because I met you in New York. I imagine probably at the Creek or Perch Cafe, something like that. But where did you actually start doing stand up, Brendan?
So the first stand up show I ever did, true story, I was interning at Rolling Stone magazine and I really wanted to do it. And I was like, I'm just going to do it and not tell anybody. I did a bar open mic in Brooklyn in Park Slope called Caddyshack, which I do it. It actually went pretty well. The next day I go in, I bragged to everyone. I'm like, guess what? Yo, just did some stand up at the Caddyshack. And everyone goes, oh, the lesbian bar? And I was like, what? And then it all came back to me. I'm like, oh, yeah, that was definitely a lesbian bar, and I had no idea. I was so green and from Iowa. Like, I went to school in Iowa. I'm a Midwest kid. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that was absolutely a lesbian bar. That was my first open mic at a lesbian bar called Caddyshack in Park Slope, which is really funny. But then I started, doing a bunch of mics in Park Slope. That's where I met you. Perch was like an absolute staple. I was there every Sunday night for years. Yeah,
that was like when I first moved to New York from Baltimore. I was trying to find my new version of like the home base that I'd had. I used to do this mic every week called Drink Till We're Funny at High Tops Bar and Grill in suburban Baltimore. So I was looking for that, and then the first inkling I found of it, because when I lived in Sunset Park, the Creek was kind of far. So
really far.
Yeah, so Perch became that for me. So you are from the Midwest. You started in New York, but you're from the Midwest. You're from Iowa?
I'm from the suburb of Chicago called Palatine, but I went to school at the University of Iowa, and I always thought about doing comedy. And my junior year, I went through a breakup with my first serious girlfriend, and I spent my whole senior year with my roommate just watching specials, and we were just sort of plotting out that like both of us were gonna do it. And he never did it. He became an accountant, but I did do it. And yeah, that wasn't until I came out to New York because I was too nervous for sure.
Gotcha. Oh no, I totally understand. I must have written like ideas like on pieces of paper for like a year before I finally did an open mic.
When was the first time that you were like, "Oh, this went well"? I know that's like a simple question. Like my open mic, I say it went well. I felt okay. So there's a big difference. Feeling like you did well, and then actually it going well. Do you know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying, and you're gonna think I'm full of it when I tell you this, but I swear this is how this happened. The first set was the ultimate encouragement I needed. Well, to give you a little bit of context, I was a theater major, so I had
so you had that background. Okay.
Yeah, I had been on stage, so that wasn't necessarily alien to me, but I had like a few things written out. I went and did this open mic. I introduced myself to the guy who ran it, and I got laughs. And I was very much doing a Mitch Hedberg impression, super deadpan kind of one-liners. I'd mostly gone out of that by the time we met. But after I did that set, I got laughs, and then the guy who ran it said, "Dude, you have to come back." And then that started it.
That's great, man. I mean, mine was like probably, I don't know, 30 times in, which I don't know exactly what was still driving me. I'm like, no, trust me. They're going to get it soon. This 9-minute Monopoly joke I wrote, I don't know why no one's laughing.
Well, also, because you had the difficulty cranked up to professional because you started in New York. And I feel like starting in like New York or even like starting in LA, I feel like that's a very steep uphill curve because you're
Yeah, so I
around
heard this great
the
analogy.
funniest people.
Yeah, I heard this great analogy. I think it was Keith Alberstead, really funny comic. He said, comedy has it backwards where you face your hardest audiences when you're the worst. It's you know what I mean? It's like if you were in T-ball and you're facing major league pitching, and then you throw in the fact that I was doing bringers sometimes, or I was barking for shows at Broadway, World Cafe, that I had to follow Jim Gaffigan, and I was like 8 months into comedy.
Right.
And everyone's just like judging me against Jim. They're like, well, this kid clearly sucks. And I'm like, you never would get mad at someone who was like 5 months into guitar and then they're next to, you know, Jimmy Page. And you're like, well, why aren't you Jimmy Page? You should be Jimmy Page. The fact that you're not Jimmy Page is clearly your fault. But like the audiences don't know that. And I don't blame them for not knowing that. But like, it's so crazy when you dive into the world of stand-up and realize like what's really going on.
Yeah, exactly. And even in this age where I feel like the audience is getting a little bit savvier, there's still like some intricacies. Not unlike I don't know, say your roommate who's an accountant. It just seems like numbers. Put number here, put the thing into the Excel. But there's nuances that you don't get until you're in the trenches for.
Oh my
a while.
God, yeah. Just even syntax and diction, and it's crazy how precise. Like, if you watch Dave Chappelle's specials, there is not a single misplaced word or timing beat. I'm not, okay, if you don't like the material, that's fine. I'm just saying, like, from a purely performance perspective,
technically.
It's crazy. Technically, it's insane.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's even the older stuff before, like, he became a little more divisive with the trans stuff nowadays.
Yeah.
But like the old stuff, even though he comes off like as super laid back and chill.
Totally.
It's all that stuff is very well, very meticulously thought out.
And I heard about this about Bill Burr too. I had a friend who was at Caroline's asking him about his process, and they're like, "Well, you're clearly like making that all up on stage." He's like, "Absolutely not."
Right.
It's all so beated out. Like it's all heightening. Everything is such a flow. That's why comics like them get so pissed when they get heckled, because they're like, bro, I was leading to somewhere and you just ruined this for me.
Yeah, exactly. Now I have to destroy you and make you feel bad about yourself before.
And destroy your whole family. It's fine.
Oh, totally. Did you grow up liking comedy? Was stand-up like a thing that you were aware of like when you were younger, or did that come later? Because I didn't really know what stand-up was until high school.
Comedy was always a big part of my house. My dad used to show me old SNL sketches. Specifically like the Belushi years. We'd always watch comedies. And then I think stand-up didn't start really registering to me until Seinfeld. I had Seinfeld's tape, his first like album that came out on tape. So I'm a little bit older than probably people who are listening to this, but I still look young. It's cool. And yeah, so that's sort of when I started really taking notice. And then I think I got into like Chappelle and Chris Rock. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Chappelle and Chris Rock early on. Yeah, those are pretty good 10 poles to go from.
I went into Carlin binge too, and then yeah, like I read all Carlin's books. Woody Allen, again, I understand that he's obviously not in a great place, but like his first stand-up CD I had, it still was holding up. Like he was ripping these one-liners that I was like, I want to tell jokes like that. And very similar to your story about Hedberg, because Woody Allen would tell these very surreal, long jokes. So I like my first real joke I wrote was like literally a 3-minute joke about Monopoly that nobody liked. But it was all because that's what he was doing. So I was like, oh yeah, well, clearly this will work. A big part of stand-up, and I'm sure you've experienced this, is like slowly, gradually finding your voice. And I feel like once you do that, everything becomes easier.
Yeah, I definitely think so. Like once you really kind of zone in on like processing things the way you really think about them, and then translating that also into joke structure. Because when you really break it down, like joke structure and even like narrative structure, because I think about like long form stories, once you kind of get that model, it's pretty easy. Well, maybe not easy, but you can sort of like get a rough building block going, and then you're into like you're whittling something. It's just like, now let me give him some eyes, and like getting into like the granular details for sure.
Yeah, and I think the comics that take off quickly, it's usually because they found their voice faster, it feels like to me. Or they are saying something distinct that other people are not. But that's usually what ends up happening.
Absolutely. So, when did you move to New York City after college?
I moved in 2006.
Okay, so 2006. So I got there in 2010. So I'm curious what it was like for you when you first get to the city. You know, you're doing perch, you're doing mics, and then to a lot of, I feel like even like still now for myself and probably a few of our peers, the club system and the ever changing landscape of how do I get into this club seems to constantly shift. What was your experience with trying to get into clubs in New York like?
Stop trying. My experience was giving up. No, I was very much a bar show, occasional club show guy. I had a show at Lucky Jack's that really, the best advice I'd give any comic and anybody doing anything right now is do your own stuff. If you want to get more shows, run a show. If you want to write more TV, make a TV show. Like, do your own stuff. And it wasn't until I was running my show at Lucky Jack's, which ended up being really successful and amazing, that I felt like I was getting a lot of spots. But I would try. I did late night at the comic strip. I did some Eastville. I did all the clubs. I also had a weekly for a while at Caroline's. But I at a certain point, I don't like hanging out. I didn't like having to suck up to bookers. And I also feel like it was so fickle. I just talked to a comic in New York who's just venting her frustration about how she just got in at New York and they just switched the booker and and I'm like, this is the same story I've been hearing for 10 years.
Yeah, no, that's what happened with me at the comic strip. After like three auditions, I finally get in there, and then the booker changes, and then I was just like, and I'm also now at a point in my life is like, okay, do I want to sit around in the bar at the comic strip for 5 hours to perform at 1 a.m, or do I want to like do this podcast and then hang out with my wife? You know?
Yeah, we have to have a life. We have to have friends. I think having a wife is a good idea. Way to go, bro.
Thank you.
And no, I mean, I hit a certain age. I would say probably like 33. And I was like, I'm good on a lot of the stand-up scene. I love comedy. I love stand-up. I don't like a lot of elements of the scene. I just find it to be like a waste of time, for sure.
Yeah, I have found, and it's in such stark contrast to my experience in like the DIY music scene, because I'm in that world too.
Oh, cool.
So where I encounter mostly a lot of support and like people willing to help, It's like, oh, let's go do a show at Shillelagh, or like, oh, I could record you for not that much money, or like, can I get on the podcast? I got a record coming out, like that kind of stuff.
That's really cool.
Like I know that there's probably some negativity out there, but I've done a pretty fine job of navigating around it.
Yeah, and I think it's getting better. I heard it's getting better in stand-up, but when I started in stand-up in New York, it was cutthroat. It was like pretty brutal. And people would like straight up be like, you're not funny to some people when they got off stage. I remember one comic was like, we need to do like tryouts before we even have this mic to see who even deserves time. Meanwhile, you're paying for this experience. It's really an exercise in masochism and like hating yourself. When I look back, I'm like, what the hell, bro? Like, go take a vacation.
Yeah, I feel like some of that romanticization of the grind, it got a little overblown to a certain point. Like, I remember, I think I was watching like a special feature on Crashing, that Pete Holmes HBO show, and they were talking about some of this. Like, I think Henry from Last Pod on the Left or something was like, oh yeah, I used to, my apartment, like the snow would blow in all night and I had to drink whiskey to fall asleep. And I was like, you shouldn't have had to do that.
I was sleeping outside. A rat became my wife. Yeah, like the stories in New York, I'm good. Like I did it all. I've experienced it all. And yeah, especially in the grind scene, it's cool when you're young. That's fine. When you're in your 20s. But if you're still doing this in your 30s, you're like, I don't care. I'll just go sleep in a field in Iowa. It's fine.
Right. But it seemed to like work out a little bit for you, because I was looking you up here. Then you did stuff in New York. Like you did like Guy Code and other shows in New York.
All
as well.
my success, most of my success has come outside of stand-up, which is really interesting because stand-up's how I started. But I used it as a vehicle in, and honestly, I've been getting back into it a lot out here. I've been performing way less, but writing a lot more, and I think writing a lot better because I think in New York, I was in the hamster wheel of chasing the next spot that I just didn't even think about writing, which is such a key part of doing comedy. I was like, no, I'll just tell the same jokes. It's fine. Just go to the next spot. I got to do a spot. And yeah, no, I had some, and I still do, like things are going well. But yeah, all my success pretty much came not from stand-up, which is interesting.
That is not uncommon as well. Like I know so many like brilliant stand-ups that are now like that energy is going into podcasts, like really successful podcasts or successful writing careers. I want to ask you, since I see you're wearing a WGA captain hat, are you on strike right now?
I am on strike, my friend. I'm wearing this hat because, well, number one, to support the cause, and two, everyone's nicer to me in Los Angeles when I have this hat on. People are stopping me, giving me free shit. A guy outside of a church the other day was like, "Sir, we really support you." I'm like, "Thank you, man. Thank you so much." And it's funny because I was kidding with this other comic I was talking to today. It's like people just discovered that there are writers in LA. It's really funny. They're like, "Whoa, you write?" I'm like, "Yeah, this whole town writes." But no, like I get discounts. It's crazy. And I've met so many people, and yeah, I've been striking a lot. I've been out there a lot.
Well, good on you, man, because I hope that you get everything that you're looking for. My wife works for a union, so I'm very much in line with like union and solidarity. Like solidarity forever, man, because there is a lot of it's a job that is so underappreciated, but it's literally the thing that has to happen before anything else can happen. You can't just show up on a set, even if you got a great director and a green screen, and just wing it.
Yeah.
Because I remember, I can't remember exactly where I saw this, but I guess during the last writer strike 15 years ago, there was a movie that was trying to do like reshoots with no writer on set, just the director and the actors. And it was going horribly from what I had heard. And
I saw a great tweet that was like naming all the things, all the great shows that happened because writers created it and how they made the networks. They made, Mad Men made AMC, Breaking Bad made, I think that was also AMC. They're like, but what happens when you put a bunch of executives in charge of created Quibi? That's what happens. So you got to be careful. Yeah, no, I mean, last night was the Succession series finale, and that entire show, it's incredible, but it's all the writing. I mean, my God, it's insane.
Yeah, absolutely. Like all those shows you mentioned, I put Barry in there as well. It's just
Barry.
Like you can literally feel like, or something I would also say about Rick and Morty when that was less of a controversial show to like.
Yeah.
Is that you can literally feel the weight of trying to make the writing funnier and stronger on the show. Like when you watch it, you're just like, oh my God, someone must have like hit their head on the table so many times to get to that line or to get to that to that sequence.
Yeah, I'm thinking the analogy of like the writing is basically like a house's foundation, but then everyone only looks at the exterior of the house, and that's usually Ryan Gosling, and they're like, Ryan Gosling's great. You're like, yeah, but without the foundation, Ryan Gosling would collapse.
Exactly. And I especially think, and I don't know how much you can say right now, but I especially think in terms of the changing economy of streaming, in that really a lot of things are going to have to change. The number one thing is the big streamers have to stop being so secretive about how well shows are doing.
Yeah,
or how well they're not.
Yeah, so there's so many things. I think the big things that the WGA is tackling, and SAG also is now authorizing a strike vote, which I think they will get, and their contract is up in 3 weeks. So there's a really good chance this whole industry will shut down, and everyone in LA is just going to be on the streets just eating edibles. It's going to be really fun. This whole town runs.
For me to get there.
Yeah, you got to come out, bro, because this whole town just runs in the entertainment industry, and now no one's going to have jobs. But Okay, so I think the most important thing to come out of this from a long-term perspective is AI in the sense of
Right.
how they're going to abuse it. So here's an example for everyone wondering why this is so scary for writers. It's not necessarily AI that I think is going to take us down. It's how they're going to use it. So I was on a call with a bunch of writers with the WGA. Writer raises his hand and he's like, hey, my manager came to me today and said, I need a writer to punch up the script. It was written by AI. Okay. So why that is a horrible news for writers is now the streamers and entertainment companies just saved $500,000 because this script has no byline. So basically what they can do is pay a writer like a small fee, like a nothing fee, to basically do the job what he or she would have had to have done without the AI, but now there's no byline. So you don't have to pay residuals. You don't have to, like,
Right.
you get a big fee, original script fee. That's all gone. So they'll basically just like have people do exactly what they said, except for just pay them nothing. Like, I don't trust the streamers at all to do the responsible thing. Like, their whole thing was like, we'll meet once a year and we'll talk about it. I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, that sounds totally fine. There's no loopholes and just a discussion that you guys will just push it as hard as they can. I mean, we're basically saying that capitalism is not going to be capitalism. And if they can save $500,000 to have a robot write a script, are you kidding me? That's all they're going to do.
Yeah. Well, because the margins are so thin, and how many things never turn a profit
Yeah.
that any corner they look to save money. I've always wondered that in the now that streaming is so predominant, I've always wondered that kind of opens the door for there's either like 5 to 6 blockbuster kind of superhero movies a year,
Yeah.
and then you just have a glut of what I call like sad marriage movies, like like there is so much stuff on like Hulu or Amazon Prime that is like set and shot in or around New York, and it's about somebody trying to find themselves, and they have relationship difficulties. Like, I like when that stuff's well done, like The Big Chill, but there's just so much of that now because it's very cheap, because you can make it relatively cheap. You can get like one person from an HBO show and then pay everybody else scale.
Oscar Isaac in Sad. Sorry, Sad Relationship, the saddest time. Yeah, I think that, listen, the streaming has been awesome for all of us because there's been a proliferation of content that would have never existed before. But what's happened is they've expected like Succession level content and Russian Doll level content without paying how they normally would for a normal TV show. And that's not sustainable. So we're also asking for residual compensation that's somewhat equivalent to what it used to be for cable and major networks. So it's the Wild West, and I get that there's been some loopholes, but like if we don't stop it now, 3 years from now is going to be too late. Like how fast AI is going and how many loopholes they'll find from now until 3 years, I can't even imagine, you know?
Yeah, and I saw another thing when in talking about AI a little bit and how a theoretical how it would be abused. You get an actor to sign off on using their likeness for AI, and then you can just pay that person like a shit day rate, and then they're all over the place because they've signed away their likeness. One of the few things you have, like as a performer, is what you physically look like, and you're going to sign that off for pennies.
It's crazy, that's what they're fighting for SAG, and I'm just telling you, if we don't strike now, we're all going to end up owning doggy daycares. So everyone just sign up, get on board with your unions.
Yeah, exactly. If you don't want all of your entertainment to be made by somebody who still has to have a day job and outside of the entertainment business,
I know
it's time for the right creative people to be compensated fairly.
That's why a lot of people I know out here are actors / drug dealers. It's great.
Right.
There's a lot of slashes.
Yeah, dude, absolutely. Well, since we're on the topic of writing, the last thing I'll say is like, I hope WGA gets what they want. But to kind of talk a little bit more about writing and like kind of how you got into that. What was your first writing gig, and how did it come about?
My first Well, I wrote headlines for The Onion early on, like when I first got to New York. I went to this really cool event with a bunch of Onion writers, and The Onion was my hero, and it still is my hero. I think it's the most consistently funny thing that's been in America. I can say that confidently for the last 25 years because they have a brilliant business model or a creative model. Here's their creative model. Their creative model is every week they get like 200 headlines from people and they pick the 10 best. So you're getting like the best jokes from all over the country, right? So Onion writers gave a talk. I go up to this guy, Joe Garden. I was so green, but that's why sometimes guys like ignorance is bliss, man. Because I went right up to Joe Garden. I was like, hey, what's up, Brendan? Love to write for you guys. I was just like, yep, let's do this. And he's like, oh, okay, fine. And so I had to get approved. And then I just every week would send in and submit headlines. And I got like 4 published. But then it just started getting to be so much time, dude. It was like, 5 hours a week to maybe make $25.
Right.
But I will tell you to this day, it's still the credit that people talk to me probably about the most. So then from there, I continued to write. I was a journalism major, so I continued to write for publications. I worked at Condé Nast. And then I started writing a web series, which did really well with Arturo Castro, who's doing really well. If you've seen The Menu, he was in Narcos, Broad City. And
who was he in The Menu?
He was one of the douchebag finance guys. The
okay, cool.
Guatemalan douchebag. I love The Menu. I thought it was fucking awesome.
Oh, so I really enjoyed it.
I think it was. I was like, oh, this is so much fun. I wish there were more. Like, you want to talk about, like, we were just talking about how there's not creative movies. It was like, that was an oasis. I was like, oh, God, exactly what you said. Like, this is not a superhero movie. There's not just digital effects bleeding my eyes right now. It's just like a cool story in a room. This is great.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So we met at a job together, and where I met a lot of amazing creative people, and we just started writing stuff together. So we wrote a web series that was really successful. And we almost sold it. And then we ended up spinning off from that, creating a Comedy Central online show, which then created a TV show that I wrote for. But before that, I got a job working on a sports comedy digital show that was so much fun. It was at HuffPost and AOL. And that was around 2015, 2016. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's right. What was that?
It's called 2 Point Lead. And this was like at the height. Remember this era when like it was all about like, all these media companies were like, we're going to do comedy and we're going to do content every day and we're going to pay for it and we love it. And then like TikTok comes like 3 years later, they're like, we're shutting it all down. Everything's gone.
Yeah.
College humor gone. Yeah.
Yeah. It was that great golden era when everyone was trying to do their version of college humor, but for sports, college humor, but for this.
Yeah. Above average. Like IFC had this whole thing. All these sites were like, we're going all in. So I was at the sports comedy show. And it was so much fun. We had to create like a 2 to 3 minute video every single day, but we got to like interview amazing athletes, amazing actors. Like we had such good access to these people. It's crazy. Like Steph Curry did it, Reggie Miller. I interviewed Jason Sudeikis. Like it was the best.
Oh, that's amazing, dude.
Yeah. So that was my first like real writer's room. And if anybody knows who Giannis Papas is, he's fantastic. He was our host, and then I took over after he left for about a couple months. So it was great.
Oh, dude, that's awesome. Yeah, Giannis is great.
He's one of my favorites. And working with him made me like him even more. He's a true like sage genius. Like he taught me so much just working with him. I have so many stories. One time, this was so good. One time, well, first of all, he used to, and I have videos of this, we used to sit in this writer's room. This is why being in this business can be amazing. And he would prank call like famous comedians from his phone. And he would pretend to be this Staten Island booker and saying that he was going to throw this awesome like Staten Island show. And he kept talking about how there's going to be like mac and cheese trays and how he has to do it for the people. And he'd always sign off like, hey, hit me up on my email. It was like something $ @conglomerate. And then he goes, spell conglomerate however you want. And he did it to like all these famous comics. Like he had Robert Kelly on the phone for like 35 minutes just talking to him about this fake show. And this is what my job was. I was crying laughing. And he's true. I'm glad to see that you mentioned comics with good podcasts. His podcast is killing and he's amazing.
That's amazing. Those are
Yeah.
things that you only get unless you take the chance and you do that first open mic,
I know.
dude.
That's
So,
a good point.
yeah, so it's worth it. If it's the thing that gets you to this, then all the wall of apathy that we stood in front of for years was worth it, Brendan.
Yeah, I don't look back with regret. I mostly look back and just am like, oh, that was somewhat abusive. Like, I would just say to anybody who's starting out or is like getting into this, we're living in such an exciting time in the sense that you could literally do anything you want. And you could just become famous by making videos in your room. So don't feel like, I always felt, and maybe you felt this way or not, like I had to do the next mic. I had to do the next show. Now it's like, everything is blown up. You can do whatever you want. And that's exciting, I think.
I do think that, and I absolutely did think that, because to me there was a clear difference between, I always drew a line between being a content creator and a performer, and I always, in the back of my head, no matter what else I was doing, because I was always like, okay, well, now we do TikTok, all right, I'll do TikTok. I was always open to that stuff, but I always knew like something would be missing if I wasn't also performing.
Yeah.
And everything else I do is to just try to create opportunities for that to happen.
That's all that comics are doing, is we just want to be able to perform and have an audience come out and see us. So we do all these other things. But what's cool about that is the old system used to be like, you have to get on Carson. Remember, it was like, everyone was like, get on Carson, that's it. And then you get 9 sitcoms.
Yeah, exactly. That and hopefully you get invited over to the couch. Get
invited
like
to the couch,
way.
and if you don't, then he doesn't like you. Then every comic's like, and then you're depressed for 5 years. I'm like, that sounds great.
Yeah,
that
it was
sounds
like
fun.
It was real high stakes, and now I feel like the big break is like not so much a part of the equation anymore. It's a lot of serious. It's a lot of mini moments that build up to something,
or a following, or like, I was just hanging out with Megan Hanley, and she's opening up for Robin Shaw. I mean, what Robin Shaw is experiencing so much success right now. It's incredible. She doesn't have to deal with the clubs. It's all because of videos she made. So you get to go entirely around the system. And in that way, I think it's great. Like, there's no more gatekeepers. If you do Fallon, people are like, I guess that's good. Comics are like, yay. And everyone's like, wait, Jimmy Fallon's still on TV? It's like, it's crazy. It's so different than how we started and how we were told it was going to be, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Man, I remember seeing Robin like crush at Caroline's, and then to see that happen, because she pops up on my feed every now and then. That's super. Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah, no, she's killing. So Robin was just out here. She sold out 5 shows out here, and Megan was opening for her.
Sweet.
It's so inspiring, because it's like, guys, she wasn't in the club. She wasn't like, I have to be part of the scene. Like, she just did her own thing. And like, that's so inspiring, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what I decided I would try to do in my own little way here. Something else I'd love to ask you about, because, you know, you have a podcast as well. I would love to ask you a little bit about this. So your podcast, you interview like lifestyle, motivational people.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say thank you to you and everybody at Stitcher. You guys like really helped my podcast get more audience, which is
good.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
Of course.
And yeah, I was like I still get messages from people. So basically the premise of my podcast is taking the world of spirituality, self-help, and personal development and doing it from like a comedic bros perspective, which is not anywhere. Because first of all, it's mostly women, and they're all like, hi, I'm a manifestation babe. Hi, I'm also a manifestation babe. It's all manifestation babes. And people with crystals and like, but I have talked to the full gamut of people. Like, it's amazing the people who I've talked to.
You brought up 2 things that I definitely wanted to make sure that I talked to you about this, because you're right. I feel like this space is very much... There are not a lot of guys in that space, and I don't mean to say that in a like, I don't feel represented. I mean it in a
totally.
like, I mean it in a way of like, if you're like an adult dude trying to get like advice on like how to be a better person, or like you got some big life changes, it seems like it's very easy to get led down a real toxic rabbit hole. Whether you're going to end up
talk
with,
to Jordan Peterson.
Whether you're gonna end up Exactly. You're going to end up with like a Jordan. You're going to end up with Jordan Peterson or some spinoff of like an Andrew Tate toxic misogynist. I'm curious, why is there no like positive why isn't there like no positive role model for like adult dudes trying to find their way?
Yeah, so this is a question I've actually asked a lot of the women I've had on my podcast because most of their businesses are specifically geared towards women. They'll be like, I coach women. Like, they're all coaching women. I'm like, what about the guys? And I, as myself, have had a lot of coaches, and they're mostly been all women. My best assumption that I can think of is I think that guys have a much harder time talking about their feelings, being in touch with their feelings, and seeing it as a sign of weakness. I think like therapy to my dad is like an actual joke.
You're not wrong. Like it sounds like we sound like we're talking about like a bygone era, but that mentality is still very out there.
Especially for people that are, I think, our age and older. I think the TikTok generation, you guys are all very in touch. Congrats. Love you guys.
Gen Z is a lot healthier, more open about talking about how they feel.
Yeah, but like, dude, absolutely. I was raised in the Midwest. Every single male figure I had in my life was the exact same repressed dad who'd be like, hey, Cubs won.
Exactly.
And that's it. Shut up. I'm going to sleep. And that's fine. But also, like, that's not normal. And it took me a long time to realize that it's not normal. There are some good guys, though, but they still have to come at it from sort of an aggro approach. It's really interesting because I'm now playing these people out in my head. I'm like, that's interesting because even their ethos is still, like, kind of aggro. Maybe because they feel like they can't get the guys unless they're like, what's up? You know,
yeah,
so,
they got to spike TV it a little bit.
Yeah, like you got Tony Robbins making you run across hot coals. But I'm very hopeful for the future, and this entire industry is exploding. Like, it's so much growth with so many coaches and manifestation people, and it's only becoming bigger. So I do think more guys will get involved, but it's a question I always have too, because I have no problem now talking about this stuff, and I've very honest on my podcast to a point where my mom got mad at me.
No, that definitely can happen when you're super honest sometimes. I feel like almost like we basically need someone like there basically needs to be like a football coach to come in and say, but instead of talking about like your game or your running game, it's talking about like, hey, you gotta let go of your fears about what that you're holding on to from your childhood because they're gonna affect your future.
Process your childhood trauma. Hey, what's your birth sign? What's your zodiac sign?
Right.
But there's this guy, Derek Grant, that I think everybody should look up. I'm about to talk to him. He's really cool. He was a former professional athlete, and now he's like, his whole thing, man, he just sits in the chair and they ask him questions, and he's like, the purpose of life is, and you're like so drawn in. You're like, wow. But again, this guy's also pretty cool. Like, he's a very cool guy.
Oh, that's right. And he's got like a nice kind of positive message.
Yeah, for sure. They exist. I just think like, yeah, it might take the TikTokers to be like, I'm in charge now, which will be hilarious when I'm being bossed around by 17-year-olds.
Yeah. Hey, as long as I got a job, that's how I feel about it. I don't care who is older than me. One last thing I'd love to ask you, because I know you got to get out here. So similarly, we're talking about like skepticism towards some of these ideas from guys. I'll speak to myself because I feel like this industry is rife for potential grifters and bullshit artists. Mm-hmm. So I'm sure that's out there. So what have you learned in talking to the women and folks you've had on your podcast? How do you separate the people who are like earnest from the bullshit artists?
That's a great question. So one of the questions I ask everybody on my podcast is I say, how often are you being the person that you say you are on social media? Because they have to really present up front. And I get it, because if I'm a client, I'm not going to go to somebody who's like, my life sucks, let me coach you, right? So I actually have found pretty much everybody has really good intentions. But what I do think is be careful of how much money they're charging you, because it's a completely unregulated industry. Don't ever if anybody pressures you on the phone to be like, and this has happened to me, you have to sign up now, I would highly advise to not work with that person. Highly.
Uh-huh.
I also, what's really good is a lot of these coaches and these programs, specifically coaches, they give you a free 20-minute consultation. Call them up and see if it feels good. And a good piece of advice I have for everybody too is, if you don't think that they're good, they themselves, like, let's say someone's like, I'm a relationship expert, I'm great with marriages, and then you talk to them and they have a horrible personal life, I would not hire that coach. I know that seems simple, but I wouldn't do it. Like, no, you have not mastered this thing. So I know that everyone thinks that there is a lot of grifting. I don't think it's nearly as bad as how I used to think it was going to be. And I found a lot of these people, because also a lot of these people are like at like my level, dude. Like, not everyone's thriving. There's some people who are really killing it. I would say in all the guests I've talked to, maybe 3 were frauds. And those were the people that I was like, okay, I see you.
Uh-huh. Like you called it immediate. You called it immediately.
I could tell, yeah, and it's The Rock. No, I'm kidding. It was The Rock and your inspirational tequila posts. No, but yeah, I do think, like, that's the other thing is, like, you can really find someone who you really vibe with and who is actually cheap because they just want to grow their business. And so it's all about how it makes you feel, because I think nobody can promise you perfection, so I also be like pretty wary of that. But yeah, no, I think it's a fascinating industry, man. It's so wide open, and I've talked to people I would never talk to, like, in my life. I talked to a woman who does something called the pussy codes.
What's that? Real quick because I can't just say thanks for doing the show.
Oh my God,
and
everyone, thanks for coming out. Pussy Goods. It's all about, like, empowering women, like, through their feminine and, like, vaginas. And my friend recommended it. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do this, and I'm going to make my mom, like, this is probably going to make my mom, like, want to move to another country, but I'm going to go for it. And I did it, and it was hilarious. It was great. She's awesome.
Well, that's fascinating. No, I could sort of draw lines of, like, you know, you're reclaiming, like, your womanhood, probably your sexuality in some way.
It's good.
Just kind of empowerment by a different name. Dude,
exactly.
what can we plug before we get out here?
Yeah, I love it. Check me out on Instagram. It is @the_Brendan Fitzgibbons. I have a Spiritual Asshole podcast. Check it out everywhere where you get podcasts. And yeah, that comes out every Wednesday. So, and also I perform, have a show in LA. If you're ever around, it's every Tuesday. Love to hear from you.
Awesome. Dude, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it. It was good to chat with you again, man.
So good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Folks, that is comedian, writer, Spiritual Asshole podcast host, and my buddy, Brendan Fitzgibbons. Folks, that was a true delight. And if you want your TV shows written by someone who can support their family and themselves so that they can write more shows for you, then you need to support the Writers Guild strike, and you need to support your comedians and your funny people. So thank you all again so much for being here. Brendan's podcast, Spiritual Asshole, is available everywhere you get your podcasts. You can also check out his website, BrendanFitzgibbons.com. I will have a link to it in the description. I will also have a link in the description if you want to know more about this podcast and want to tell a friend. You can send them to awesomedisaster.com. That has links to everywhere that you can follow the show. We are on Apple, Stitcher, and Spotify. If you want to help us, please, our algorithmic overlords, if you aren't subscribed, if you want to hit that subscribe button and share some episode links so that the algorithm knows that my podcast is cool, I'd be appreciative of that. You can follow me on Twitter @ComicWillCarey, @WillCarey23 on Instagram. And if you want to go a little bit further in support of the show, you can check out our merch store as well as our Patreon. Links to both of those are awesome. Also at awesomedisaster.com. And if as you're going into your week, or if you're coming out of your week, depending on when you're listening to this, I would say something that I thought of just now from the movie Into the Abyss was a Werner Herzog documentary about a gentleman on death row, and talking about on gravestones the dash between the birth year and the death year represents your life. So there's a great line from that movie about living your dash. So if there's one thing you think about, go out and do that, because that's gonna, when I'm hoping that when it's my time to clock out, that dash has a lot of stuff to remember, and a lot of good times and memorable experiences. So thank you all again so much for being here on a whimsical monologue, and I'll see you next time between awesome and disaster. Stay safe, get vaxxed and boosted, and stomp out fascism. Take care, everybody.